Well, I appreciate the introduction, Landon and Corey Peterson. Thank you for asking me to be on here. Corey and I worked together when we were at the University of Minnesota for a couple of years. So very grateful to cross paths with him and get coordinated, especially get coordinated with this. So it's my absolute pleasure to be on here and talk to you guys about uh, really, what I think is one of the most important things as it comes to nutrition. Yes, there is the science, there is the macronutrients, the importance of what proteins, what carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, hydration, all that stuff that goes into the human body. I think, we've kind of been beat down on the head with, all of these different types of podcasts, all these different social media blasts. And as you hear with different, podcasters talking about the optimal morning routine, this, that, and the other. Um, I just feel that it's very important to, talk about, what players and athletes do on a day-to-day basis, not only within the walls of, the facility that you work with them in, but also too, what they're doing outside of, the building. And also, you know, how are they conducting their day? Are they the type of players or athletes that, leave everything to chance and just do everything on a whim, or are they very regimented and structured, or maybe they need a little bit more guidance in how to go about doing that? So, sorry to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent. That's what I tend to do from time to time. So, my apologies, and please bear with me with that. But I just really think that this is, not necessarily a missing piece to me. You could say that, but it's just something that is really important to me. And I think as a fundamental principle, it's one of the things that I just stress more than anything with athletes. So, and as far as questions, yeah, just please put them in the notes. We'll kind of get to them. I know we're kind of on a tight schedule, and I also ate up 5 minutes just trying to figure out my computer for some reason. So to get into it, so beyond the macros, finding your nutrition routine or your overall routine, daily routine is really kind of the most important thing to me in my life. Like I kind of talked about, because I mean, I live it daily. I'm a very regimented person. My wife would say it's a double-edged sword. It's a great thing, but it's also your worst enemy. So player preparation and routine, to me, this is again, kind of what I was alluding to in the very beginning. So, we had a coach here, a long time ago that would stress with players, it's all about preparation, preparation, preparation. That goes into weight room, that goes into how you feed yourself, what you drink, everything you drink. You would also say everything you smoke, put in your body impacts you on a daily basis. So your preparation throughout the week impacts you ultimately on the single day that's the most important day, which is game day. For us, that's Sunday. So I know some of you guys, or so you all might work in basketball or soccer or, different various sports. I'm going to talk in football terms because that's the area that I work in. But you can obviously, relay this to, whatever sport that you're working in. So preparation throughout the 6 days, and on the seventh day, Sunday, the most important day. So everything leading up to that is very, very valuable. So obviously one day of the week is the most important day of the week, but also the other 6 days are incredibly crucial to how you conduct yourself and how you go about, soft tissue work in the weight room, or in the dining room. What does your meal routine look like from a hydration standpoint? What are you doing? Also at home, what's your environment? Is your environment set up for your success, from everything from your family life, and also from the sleep, from sleep hygiene, this, that, and the other. And then it's just also what your routine is. So your preparation basically is your routine. So for our players, more than anything, this is kind of like what we lead off of with, the expectations. So this is kind of coming from more or less the rookie talk, but this kind of parlays into how we start talking about the routine process and what this ultimately means. And that's the first thing that I start with, is just talking about routine instead of getting into the nuts and bolts on macros, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, how to go about fueling yourself, this, that, and the other. Because to me, once you have the routine and the habits, all that established, everything kind of, you know, plays into itself. So being as players are coming in, learn the hows and whys and being open minded and willing to learn, adapt, and change old habits. Because coming from college, and that was a big transition for me to understand, in a professional setting, you deal with a wide variety of ages. You could have someone that's drafted that's 20 years old, and you also have someone on the team that's 37 years old. So obviously you're dealing with a wide variety. So sometimes guys are very set in their ways, or you're getting a guy from college that, literally has no idea and is just like bug-eyed in the building and trying to learn. And, you're trying to kill old habits where, sometimes in college they're pushing Sour Patch Kids is something to eat pre-practice, or they're, just have bad habits and they don't understand the hows and whys, because sometimes you are just trying to get calories in people in a collegiate setting. And then also to apply what you've learned and test things out. So that's one thing I stress with our players too, is just you got to be willing to try new routines, adapt, and break old habits. Apply what you've learned, understand the hows and whys, and test it out for yourself to see if it's something that's applicable to you that you can do long term. Big thing here, understand needs versus wants. There's a big difference that, you're gonna, want, two cheeseburgers, but do you actually need two cheeseburgers? Or you're gonna want donuts, but do you actually need it? There is a time and place for those strategically in a fueling plan. But also at the same time, like understanding, like you have to fuel with purpose more than anything. Establishing a routine and also communication, so the feedback is key from that standpoint. So that, to me, those four bullet points really all kind of go into the starting point of, your relationship and the communication that you have with the player, and how you can get them to establish a solid routine or find out what they're doing currently, and then how can you tinker with it based on your schedule, practice, this, that, and the other, to help optimize those things. And then here I just have our nutrition principles. So this is, to me, kind of the six or five, pillars, or if you want to call it six, is really the things that I kind of hit on. So obviously consistency and routine. So the importance of stressing the routine part of it, hydration, nutrient timing, understanding balance and variation within your diet. So obviously, stressing here that all foods matter. Everything brings something to the table, pun intended. So having variety within your diet so you can help optimize and get, all the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that, you need. Um, Understanding energy needs and the demands of the sport. And then really not stressing supplementation here, but more or less smart supplementation. So to me, within these six things, or within the five things, there's a routine that goes into all of them. So a hydration routine, what are you doing to start the day? How are you doing that throughout the day? Nutrient timing. So what's your routine look like before, during, and after training? Balance and variation. So your meal routine. So what are you doing within your meals that says, that goes along with your goals? Um, and then also understanding just basically energy needs, which kind of ties into weigh-ins and weigh-outs. You kind of use that as a tool to assess if you're getting if your routine's really working for you, if you're gaining too much weight, if you're losing too much weight, if you're maintaining weight, if your body composition with is in check. And then just smart supplementation. If you do supplement, use it. We stress, NSF certified for sport, to ensure that, the players are getting the safest and best supplements. But not something that we're going to stress, hey, you got to take this. It's more or less just like, does it make sense for you? Does it complement your diet? If there's something that you're lacking, maybe we can't supplement with it if it's absolutely necessary. Or if you get a meathead, then they're just going to want to take a pre-workout, and you got to tell them which one's the best one. Slide here. So to me, I love this quote. This is something from John C. Maxwell. So when I saw this quote, this really resonated with me. You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret to your success is found in your daily routine. So that really goes into you are what you repeatedly do. So everything from a nutrition standpoint, like one of our previous coaches, is straight from him. Everything you eat, drink, supplement, smoke, put in your body says a lot about who you are. Training, doing things correctly, soft tissue work, mobility. From a football standpoint, how are you handling yourself in the film room? Do you are you coachable? Are you the type of person? Are you very deliberate with your opportunities in team reps, practice? What's your mindset, the purpose, the attitude, your presence within the building? Are you just kind of going through the motions and just being here? So you are what you repeatedly do every single day. So timing is everything, but time is always happening. So you have to take, full opportunity to, maximize everything when you're in the building, but also to, like I said in the beginning, what are you doing outside the walls that can ultimately help you? So the goal to me for any players, whether they're rookie or whether they're, a 10-year veteran, is to build a better routine to have a better outcome. That's the overall goal. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like that's to me, your routine will say everything about who you are and what you repeatedly do every single day. So the goals is starting off with, when you're working with a player, so what are you working towards? So are they working towards having, trying to figure out, what's the best routine for them? Or is it body composition? Is it trying to, figure out if they need to gain weight, lose weight, all these kinds of things. Every player is going to have a goal, but goals can be temporary. But what are the habits that we're going to establish getting to that particular goal and then continuing on with the things that they've kind of set in place? So to me, it's kind of starting with a calendar. So we're in the off season right now, kind of like, well, in the summer break. So you really kind of have to look at, important dates for players because that will resonate with them and how they can get things done in a timely manner or efficiently. So dates to know, or as I like to call, what is your due date? And so we have our players are reporting in, I think, July 23rd. So that's kind of like a due date for like, all right, I left here with 10 more pounds to lose. How do I go about doing that? All right, well, let's build a calendar and look at, a weight loss trend that we can tend to see week after week, but how are we going to go about doing that? Let's look at, certain things within, let's look at a grocery list that you can do every single day. What or let's, look at other different variables that impact, getting to that ultimate goal. So for our due dates for our players, report day. Oh, sorry, kind of getting ahead here. Report day. So April and then training camp in late July. Our off-season program, so that's what OSB stands for, runs from April to June, and then time off early off-season January through April. So those are kind of the segmented dates that players over a yearly perspective can look at and be like, okay, I know I need to show up in April in this condition. I know I need to break, OSP in June in this condition and be ready to report for training camp in July in shape, ready to go. Because we just recently told our players too, like, do not use training camp as a time to lose weight or try to get in shape. That's bad news for everybody. So you can't do that, and you're going to set yourself up for failure and have this giant yo-yo effect, and could potentially, lead to soft tissue injuries if you're trying to go too hard or trying to use the heat to lose weight and dehydrate yourself. That's just not good. And then also to time off, they know they can kind of relax a little bit, enjoy themselves for a little bit, and then try and then ramp back up in training. So giving these players this stuff ahead of time, these due dates, I think really kind of helps so they can segment things out and know when they're going to take breaks and know when they're, when they need to ramp things up and, have a plan essentially. Uh, what is the most recent body composition test? For us is a really important thing as we assess, how much fat mass do they have, how much lean mass do they have, which direction do they need to go? Are they someone that just needs to maintain lean mass because they have good muscle to bone ratio? Are they over fat, or do they not have good conditioning? So we utilize body composition a lot actually to assess to where the guys need to be as they go into these certain parts of the year. That's just an individual one-off conversation with them. If, where are you at? Where do you need to be? Here's where we need to tinker with things. Here's what we need to change. And, here's the direction of how to do it. What trips are you taking? How long? The type of trip? Is it a party? Is it a relaxing? Is it a family trip? That factors into things because that factors into time off. How long? If they have a personal chef, do you need to coordinate with them? So a lot of communication variables that go into it. Where are you training? Also, the time of training is a very important piece of the puzzle for me, as I help build routines for players, because that impacts, for us, we're very fortunate to have, a really big and nice training facility. So we have all the bells and whistles here that obviously go along with our programming. So, and also too, we supply meals during, active time. So in the off season, obviously for training camp in the early parts of the off season right now, then the summer is kind of a downtime for us where we're not supplying many meals. So that also impacts player routines. Do they need to go meal prep for themselves? Do they need to find a meal prep company? Are they someone that needs a chef? So those are the things that, that go into, okay, what's your meal situation look like, and also impacts your financial situation. So how much money do you have left to spend? That looks very different from, if you're Tyreek Hill versus someone that's a practice squad player that, doesn't, that might have minimal funds left based on, how well they save throughout the season. So, um, all that impacts what a player's routine could potentially look like. So I always start with a calendar, and I'm sorry if I kind of got off on, different parts here, but these are the pieces of the puzzle and kind of the bullet points that I look at from that standpoint of, these are the questions that I start asking. What's the time of year? What's their goals from a body composition standpoint? Where do they need to be? What's the weight look like? What trips are you taking? Where are you training? What time are you training at? What's your meal situation look like? And what's the financial piece of the puzzle? Then, it's interesting when I ask players, I sit them down and I'm like, okay, run me through your daily routine. Typically, most players will start with, okay, well, I wake up at this time, but then I kind of stop them and I'm like, okay, well, let's look at, like, what do you do at night when you get home? Like when you have dinner, what time are you having dinner? And then what are you doing? So I always kind of start with, the night before, because I always say that your sleep hygiene habits and your quality of sleep and how you kind of power yourself down and wind down will ultimately dictate your routine for the next morning. So if you're the type of person that's like rushing to go to sleep, you're not going to get a good night's sleep that night. At least that's my professional opinion. And then that leads into kind of like, you feel rushed, or you missed your alarm, or your the next day just gets very thrown off. So I always kind of start with this part of it the night before I get into the morning of the next day. So sleep hygiene is an important part of the whole routine process. So to me, this is your preparation for quality of sleep. And why? Because sleep is very restorative. That's very proven. I don't really need to get into that. I think everybody understands that. And the tips we just obviously give to them is just, dark, cold room, obviously 65, 68 degrees, the 10-3-2-1-0 rule. So 10 hours beforehand, limit caffeine as much as you can. I get a lot of laughs if I ever present this. 2 to 3 hours before last large meal. I'm sure I'll get some questions, maybe, debate around this, but uh, to me, last large meal, large being your most operative word there. So is if you're dealing with somebody that needs to gain weight, obviously there are some, differences within that. They may need more calories, so they may need that late night feeding, but what does that look like as well? 2 hours before limit work, so wind down, not watch too much film. 1 hour before, no screens or limit blue light. Zero, lights out. So go to bed at the same time every day, have the same sleep and wake schedule, just to be consistent with that so you're not kind of all over the place. So the goal is to overall get 7 to 8+ hours of quality sleep per night. So is having not necessarily just going straight to sleep, but it's the healthy habits you're having beforehand that set up an optimal routine. And most players, that we work with or struggle with in this area, they're gaming half the time into the wee hours of the night, or they're putzing around on their phone, um, or they're watching a lot of TV, or they're binge watching shows. So I try and tell them like you got to find, a way to either limit those things or you got to find like a new routine before you go to bed. So at least just start with like if you got all the lights on, let's just start with dimming the lights and you still do your gaming system. Or if you're binge watching a show, maybe you've watched something that you've watched before, so your mind's not actively like in tune to the show to see what happens next. Or pick up reading, or just focus on breathing, or just find some time to be able to relax because we live in such a very stressed, shoulders up and very tense environment. So, how can you, as an athlete, find your gears to be able to wind down and unstress to get the most optimal sleep? Because most people are going to be like, man, I need some melatonin. All right. Well, before you start taking melatonin, let's look at what you're doing throughout the night to get you set up for optimal sleep to have a good routine the next day. So, starting with the sleep part of it and what they're doing at home is a big impact. And there's a lot of insight that you can gather from that, and seeing why either their body composition is the way that it is or their weight is the way that it is. And then building off the daily routine. So, what does the morning look like? I talked about waking up at the same time every single day, starting the day right with 20 ounces of fluids plus electrolytes in the morning. Obviously, we live in a hot, humid environment. So, stress that quite a bit. And that's kind of our little zinger is start the day right. And then, all the buzz about getting sunlight, but there is, from a circadian rhythm standpoint, there's quality research behind that and just setting those sleep wake cycles. And, I think our guys, do a good job of, we're very fortunate that, our players for breakfast in the morning can go eat outside, and we get a handful of guys that, go eat outside on the patio deck and, get sunlight. And, we stress it on our performance team, and every opportunity that we're able to do a dynamic warm up outside, for our early lift group, we'll take that opportunity and go do it because we see the importance of it. Training at the same time every day. So obviously in season, they got that pretty much, scripted for them, so they don't have to worry about that. Um, but in the off season, that's a big stressor is, find that training time and stick to it every single day. And then understanding that there's a difference between training and working out. Like this is more or less just from a mentality standpoint, just like you're not going to exercise, you're going to train because you're trying to achieve something. Nutrient timing and meal timing, kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. And then life, family, events, and trips. So planning ahead, know what's coming, due dates, communicate with us. So a lot of this stuff I kind of already hit on, but this is that next part. So we talked about sleep and what you're doing at home, but also what does the next day look like? What does that consist of? And most of the time for the players, it's getting up in the morning, eating, training, and then the life, family, events that kind of go with it. So understanding all those three pieces of the puzzle. All right, getting into some of the principles. So sticking with, so there's, all those different five pillars have their different routines that go in it. So from a hydration standpoint, we talk about start the day right with electrolytes, fluids and electrolytes first thing in the morning. And why that is because we need it to live. You need fluids, you need water to ultimately live. Even plants need it to live for crying out loud. So, but also too, you need it to, help prevent muscle cramping. That's Yes, it's such a multifaceted thing from cramping, it could be neuromuscular fatigue and underfueling, this, that, and the other, but we do know that hydration can play a role in that. Also improving muscle quality. And then just a big thing for, our players and just from an understanding and relaying it in their terms. So hydration impacts them on a physical level. So a 1 to 2% drop in total body water weight can equate to about a 5 to 15% loss in overall performance. So relaying that to them, if you run a 4.4, that's now 4.6, 4.5, 4.6. So you're slower if you're dehydrated. So Um, and you'll also feel like you're working exponentially harder. So you need to be able to hydrate, understand the hows and whys behind what hydration can do for you and the importance of it. Therefore, you might take it a little bit more seriously. So it's just showing it in this visual too. So a hydrated muscle versus a dehydrated muscle. Obviously, there's been pictures of beef jerky versus a ribeye steak. But what is a hydrated muscle? It's a muscle that contains water, carbohydrates, and electrolytes. So it's heavier, it's recovers better, these decreased risk of muscle pulls and cramps. Dehydrated muscle, water, no carbs, or minimal electrolytes. It's a lighter muscle, worse recovery, increased risk of muscle pulls and cramps. So to me, this is an easy visual just to be able to show them like, okay, lean mass, if it's more dense, it's better for recovery. It's better for you from a performance standpoint. If it's dried up, not going to be as effective. And you want to be effective if you want to give looks, if are trying to, make the team, and you want to give good quality team reps, you need to make sure that you're in the best position possible. So, but what does that look like? How do you plan your day? Daily, 1 ounce for every pound that you weigh. So if you're dealing with an athlete that's 300 pounds, obviously that's quite a bit of fluids, but if you do the math and calculations on it, it equates pretty equivocally. So that's her kind of rule of thumb. We always tell them have a bottle with you at all times. Don't wait till you're thirsty. Those simple things. Just continue to sip fluids throughout the day. Pre-workout, so about an hour before or even sooner. 16 to 20 ounces prior to activity. Electrolytes for fluid retention. During, drink when you're thirsty, like we talked about. And then for weigh outs, this is more really kind of relays to training camp, but I always tell them like you can do this on your own, and it's a good practice to have too. So weigh in and weigh out, especially during heavy training times, you can see actual fluid loss and what you've lost during training, even if it's in a 1 to 2 hour span. If you're someone that loses 5 pounds in an hour and a half just training and conditioning session, that's that's quite a bit, and especially if you're a skill player, smaller athlete. But if you're a big guy, maybe from a percentage standpoint, that's not that much, but it's not something to completely neglect as well. So 20 ounces of fluids for every pound that's lost during training, and then just utilizing urine color charts is kind of a good reference tool to target, how hydrated are you. Obviously there's different, devices you can urine specific gravity. There's these inflow, little inflow sensors you can put in urinals now that, we also kind of supply to, little behavioral feedback tools to, assess your hydration status. So it's something that's very important to us because the environment that we live in, and we stress it, and it's only getting hotter. I don't know how, I guess the global warming part is crazy right now, but yeah, so it's a big important piece of the puzzle to us. And then for this just visual is just for players to understand, the different ounces. So if we're telling them, hey, drink, at least a gallon of water a day, what does that visual look like? If you're losing 2 pounds in a practice, I might tell them in their heavy, heavy, heavy sweater. And we've done um, sweat tests on them, and they, lose a bunch of electrolytes. I might tell them, hey, get those 2 pounds back by drinking just one whole Pedialyte and help get your electrolytes back too. And then also this visual of 20 ounces. Hey, for every pound you lose, drink at least a Gatorade bottle worth of fluids just to help get your fluids back. Um, so there's, just so they have the visual on that part of it. Nutrient timing, so planning around workouts. So this is the routine they have before, during, and after workout. So especially now in this time of year, everybody's going to be training at different times. So it's understanding, we have some guys that train at 6. We have some guys that are wanting to train at 9. Some guys that train in the middle of the day. So helping them plan around, what they need to do to optimally get the most out of their training. But it's also too, as a dietitian, as a practitioner, for you to understand what's going on within the training. How intense is the training? Is it a downtime where it's more regenerative? Is it, ramped up with a lot of conditioning and you're doing a lot of change of direction? So it's very taxing it's very metabolically taxing, and also very, from a central nervous system, very taxing. You have to understand that part of it because that impacts your fueling plans. So at times you might need less carbohydrates, at times you might need way more carbohydrates, and also depending on their body composition, their goals, those are the things that kind of go into nutrient timing. But the important part of this is um, for them to just understand, because now nowadays we kind of live in such a very low carb society, or no sugar, this, that, and the other. This is more or less stressing the importance of why carbohydrates matter around training, especially if you're in those intense training times, or especially if your training is, well over 2 hours. So I'm stressing the importance of carbohydrates and what it can do for, delaying fatigue, prolonging your endurance, and then also the recovery portion of why the combination of carbohydrates and protein matter at that time. So again, as it really relates to the routine portion of it, that's figuring out what time that training time is. So that's, to me, that's why it's so critical, because that kind of tees up what you're doing before and after workouts, obviously, but also too from I call it the growth phase. So your post training meal, and once you understand your training time and know it and you stick to it, you can plan breakfast, lunch, dinners, and then your opportunities to fuel before and after workouts. So that's why it's such a, to me, it's such a critical piece of knowing that, because you can fine tune this portion of it, the what goes on around the training, and then the meals afterwards to help them get the best bang for their buck. So we talk about balance and variation. So that's the variety within. That's the variety of your diet within your meals. And I just have this on here, just some common deficiencies that you tend to see in athletes. So vitamin D, why that's important. Magnesium, why that's important. Omega-3 fatty acids and iron. And bottom line is to eat a variety of foods so you can make sure that you cover everything. What we tend to see in a lot of athletes is these these big three, the vitamin D, the magnesium, and the omega-3 fatty acids. I mean, obviously we are surrounded by an ultra processed society, so getting good quality food and nutrition is very challenging. But also too, our dining staff does a really good job of trying to implement, different, types of fatty fish, or different types of whole grains and dark leafy greens and vegetables that offer these different vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, macronutrients that our players, so we tee them up to get a wide variety of foods and expose them to things. Or if we're offering something that might be, I guess, if you want to perceive it as a less popular item, sometimes your white fishes can be that way, but why is it important? Or why would, spinach be important? Why would, trail mix or mixed nuts be an important part of your diet, or why to incorporate it as a healthy snack? So just those small things that we can do from an education standpoint and push it so the players can be more understanding of why it's important to eat a variety of foods so they don't miss out on getting these vitamins and minerals. Understanding energy needs, you know, there's nothing more fundamental to recovery than consistently, getting the overall calories that you need every single day. So if athletes are under recovering and overtraining, that's going to lead to the, you know, they're just going to feel terrible. I mean, Landon, you and I talked about earlier before we hopped on the call, I kind of hit a point too where I wasn't, eating near as much as I needed to, following a certain regimen, and I had a kid and I felt myself crashing down. So our players can, reach this obviously a lot quicker because they're going under, or they're under tons and tons and tons of stress, not only from the field, but also from the film room, what we're doing in the weight room. Stress isn't a bad thing, but if it's chronic, it can be. So understanding energy needs, athletes eat and train, they don't diet and exercise. So again, that kind of goes back to that mindset of having purpose and intent with your nutrition and knowing why you're fueling, um, and understanding their goals. So um, how do they know if they're meeting their overall needs? Obviously, we're fortunate to have the platform Note Meal for calorie tracking and to also see their trends in their body composition. But we also do daily weights or weekly weights. So this is just more or less an example of kind of our pre and post weigh-ins. I tend to look at these pre-weights every day to kind of assess if someone's, getting the, nutrition and the calories that they need. So obviously, we've seen players lose in the training camp practice upwards of, I've seen the most I've ever seen is 18 pounds. But 13, 12, 6, 11. So losing a quite a large percentage of overall body weight based on where they're at. But also looking at the next day, where is that weight going? Is it still under from the day before? Is it matched or is it over? Or so just looking at all those things and what's the context within that. Are they coming off a day off? So the next day you're going to see or you're going to see that day a larger weight loss, and then the next day they may not get back all their weight. But looking at the just asking questions too, like how much did you eat last night? What time did you go to bed? Well, I kind of went to bed early. I was really tired last night, so I didn't get a chance to get my late night meal, or I didn't eat as much because I just didn't feel well. So peeling back the onion layer to get more context behind stuff so you can help in that day. And so typically, if we see this -2 from the day before, that's when I kind of send, not necessarily like sound the alarm, but I'll just give everybody on the performance team a heads up, like, hey, this guy's down a little bit and wait first thing in the morning. He's going to eat breakfast. He's going to hydrate. We're going to weigh back in. We're going to see kind of where he's at before he goes back out to the field. So my minimum is at least -2 or more from the previous day to start asking questions. Even -1 from I'll start asking questions just to be precautious. But this is my alert system for myself, is kind of a trigger and like, okay, I need to ask a little bit more. Supplements. This is actually something that we kind of told our players right before they broke for camp. So just reminding them that any test, positive test for anabolics, first offense, 4-game suspension, second offense, 8 games, third offense, 17 games. So it's not something to play around with. It's not something to just, go roll into a GNC and just grab something off the shelf. You got to ask questions. You got to ask, essentially ask us before you do anything. And that's what we tell them. So, but understanding too that supplements are supplementing for something that you're not getting in your regular diet. So if you're searching for an answer on something, like you got to start peeling back the onion layers on what your routine actually looks like. So if you don't, so for us, it's like if you don't know, ask. Like just make sure that you ask questions, and then we're going to ask you questions on what you do every single day of why you're looking for something in particular. So if that's a pre-workout, if that's vitamin D, if that's this, that, and the other, we need to know those things so we can help guide you in the right direction. Because what you don't want to do is over supplement. You don't want to be taking a multivitamin, athletic greens, and vitamin D, and this and that, and all this stuff to where you're just relying on external things to try and be healthier, when ultimately look at your lifestyle and habits. That's something that you just don't want to get into. So the overall goal is, so have a goal to work towards. So we talked about assessing body composition, build a calendar for yourself, know those due dates, know those times of year, and be aware of those kinds of things. Set a good sleeping environment, have a wind down process, and just keep things simple. So set a training time, build your meals around it, and looking at your fueling opportunities: breakfast, lunch, dinner, pre, post, fuel, snacks if necessary, depending on where you're at. So I know it's kind of a little bit all over the place, but I did want to, stress talking about the routine part of things, and then getting into what our kind of education system is on those very simple things to help build a better routine to have that better outcome. Because I think that's such an important, again, I'll say it over and over again. I really don't care, that I think it's the most fundamental principle. And I think it's the most valuable thing that players can do for themselves, or athletes in general, people in general, shoot, is just have a routine. Because to me it's just like it sets up purpose. It doesn't need to be the most overly regimented thing or like neurotic thing in the world. It's just something that you do every single day that should be very basic and very sustainable. And it's just, to me, it's going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, hydrating, having good eating habits, having good training habits, and understanding the hows and whys behind what you're doing. Because if you're just doing stuff to do stuff, then you're never going to have the sustainability. You're never going to have the outcomes that you're looking for. And you're just going to be all over the place. And we see it all the time. And that's okay, because sometimes you really need to go through the failure process to understand. I never want to do that ever again. I never want to be in that position. I never want to show up at training camp overweight. I want to make sure I do everything possible to put myself in the best position to have the best outcome for one particular day in general. So that's my soapbox. I appreciate you guys bearing with me on that. Sorry if we kind of went over a little bit, but we'll take questions or anything that you guys need.
Yeah, you can throw your questions in the chat or just unmute yourself. But thanks, John. This was super cool.
Yep.
I have a quick question if I can just jump in. Typically, normally, like with our 6 a.m. lifts or early lifts, a lot of kids are, I don't like eating in the morning, it doesn't feel good, whatever, those kind of things. And they're always going to see the same answer from a strength coach, from an AT. How do you handle that kind of conversation in terms of, building the habit and educating them about getting up maybe a little bit earlier to hydrate and put something in their body?
Uh, so basically, what you're asking is, how do you handle the situation when a player says, I don't do anything before I work out because I can't do it.
Pretty much, yeah. For the early risers, it's always that same kind of thing. It's not everyone, but those kids that I don't
Yeah,
like.
no. I completely, no, I get it now. So I mean, I'm personally the same way. I can't like have a large meal before a training session, so you kind of use that tactic to um kind of relate to them. Like, well, no, like I understand, like where you're coming from, and I'm the same way. I can't really tolerate a whole lot, but also, trying to educate them too that your body over time can start to adapt to, being able to take in a little bit more. So if that's something that we need to start with, just like, all right, a Gatorade or something like that. So you got to think like, okay, that at least has electrolytes, that also has carbohydrates and sugars in it to help fuel that training session. You also have to educate them on a sense too of like, okay, this is why, like, you're about to go into a very intense training session. I don't know what you did the night before. But this is why I'm educating you on this so that you're able to get the adaptations. I'm assuming you might be a strength and conditioning coach, yes?
Yeah,
Okay, so you're trying to get adaptations from a particular training session. So to me, it's all about the education process and like, hey, can kind of negotiate something here? Like, can we start with a Gatorade and maybe work towards something? Or like, if God forbid, like if it has to be fruit snacks, let's start there or something like that. Or if they're just like very hard headed and it's like, okay, well, let's look at what you're doing the night before too. Because if it's a 6 a.m. lift and you've eaten a lot the night before, you may not need an absorbent amount of carbohydrates right then there at 5:55 first thing in the morning. Like, let's look at like how you're feeling the night before. Maybe let's try and eat a larger meal, a little bit more carbohydrate heavy, so that your glycogen stores are able to handle at least a little bit of this. Not a little bit, but are able to be able to sustain and get through the 6 a.m. lift, depending on what it is. Now, if it's something that's more aerobic, regenerative, this, that, and the other, then like, all right, we really don't need to like slam the body with 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates if it's just a get in, get out 30-minute session. But if it's something that's very intense and very specific on what you're trying to achieve from an adaptation standpoint, then yeah, it's like, hey, like you're going to need something because if you don't, like, you might be able to withstand this for one, maybe a couple of days, but week after week, if this is a habit that you continue, this is what we're going to see. And you're not going to get what I'm trying to get out of you right now.
awesome.
But so sorry to go off on like a large tangent, but it sucks, but it's a negotiation process.
Yeah, yeah. No,
It
that's
really so it's just finding something that they can relate to and be like, I see that. You got to have them understand from what I've learned. Sometimes in college it's a little bit easier because you just tell them what to do, but now here they get so hard headed with intermittent fasting or I heard this, I heard that, that you it gets a little murky sometimes. But I always just felt like coming at it from both angles and seeing being a devil's advocate always helps too.
awesome.
But then finding that sweet spot that they're be like, all right, I can try that.
Thank you so much. That helped a lot.
And also too, like I'll prelude with this. As it relates to anyone's specific situations, whether it's something a scenario like that. I mean that's it's fine and easy, but like sometimes I get a lot of questions on like, okay, well, we don't have the budget to supply these snacks or something like that. I really can't help answer questions like that too much because everyone's situation is so very different and budgets are different. So I'm just gonna if you have questions like that, I'm happy to jump on a call, maybe like afterwards or follow up with an email. But sometimes I get those questions and it's like, I don't know. Everyone, like, if you're dealing with college athletes that have trouble sleeping, I really don't know how to help there because we deal with the exact same issue: education, education, education. So, just wanted to hit you all with that before we start going down the line. If someone has questions like similar to that,
John, one question.
yep.
What are the one sentence remarks you've made to athletes that have had the most impact on them changing their nutrition routines?
One sentence remarks that I've made.
Yeah.
Why are you doing what are you doing? So, like, why do you do what you do? Like,
Mhm.
what's basically like what's the I always just why? Simply just like why? It's like, when you're dealing with kids and they ask 1,000 questions of why, and you have to keep explaining. You keep asking that question, you're gonna try and find out more things. Like, well, if you had a bad night's sleep, why? What happened? So why do you do what you do? What's the intent? What's the purpose? To keep it simple, it almost feels like parenting half the time.
John, what would be your, I guess, out of your pillars, if you had to like kind of rank them from, highest priority, not necessarily lowest priority, but if you had to rank them for a high school population. I'm a strength coach with the high school population, and summertime is absolutely crazy. You have a
Yep.
million camps. You have strength training with me. You have your sport practices. We're a smaller school, so a lot of our kids are multi-sport athletes. So summertime is absolutely crazy. What would your kind of priority as far as your pillars go and educating those kids on what to focus on? Um, so you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always gonna. I mean, I'm biased. I just think the consistency and the routine part of it's very important. If you can start that and try and establish it at a young age, it's really, really, really important. I Since they're growing kids, I think just understanding the metabolic demands of the sport that they're playing and just understanding energy needs is probably it's like a 1A, 1B. Because I mean, those kids, like, I mean, you start talking about like, what broccoli can do for them or what spinach and the variety in their diet, and it's kind of like they get tuned out. So it's like, and I think you could probably, if I'm just off the cuff, like routine, the understanding of energy needs and the demands of their sports, hydration, nutrient timing, and then balance and variation of just overall good nutrition, what that can do for them. Now, I mean, obviously, you're dealing with different budget constraints and dealing with kids from different backgrounds and economic positions. So I think those are probably, if I were to rank them, that's how I would do it. Obviously, every single one has an important value to it, but to me, that's what I would do. You got to
Appreciate
stress
it.
you got to stress the sleep, the habits, and then just get into like this is your sport, this is what it demands of you, and this is you need to eat, you need to fuel, and if you don't, you're going to see the negative impacts of that. To keep it simple.
Thank you.
Yep.
John, we're back up at the top of the hour. Thank you a ton. This has been really cool to hear your experience at the pro NFL level. So thank you. Um,
Yeah, my
I
pleasure.
for everyone here that's attending, I just put my email address in the chat. If you'll send me your name, address, and shirt size, I'll send a fit t-shirt out to you. So thank you all for attending. This is the summer series. So we've got a few more guest lectures and then probably 4 or 5 lectures for the rest of the summer that are concentrating on how a strength and conditioning coach can start their own side hustle. So we'll be sending that information out to you. But again, John, thank you a ton. This was fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate you guys doing this and having me.
Cool. Thanks, y'all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.